Welcome to today's Harvard Business Review Analytic Services webinar, Recreating Work as a Blend of Virtual and Physical Experiences. I'm Abbie Lundberg, a contributing editor to HBR Analytic Services and former longtime editor-in-chief of CIO Magazine. I'll be moderating today's event, and I want to thank Verizon for making it possible. Now, we do want this to be an interactive webinar, so if you have questions or comments at any time, just type them into the chat box. We'll answer as many questions as possible at the end of the session. And if you need help, just click the yellow question mark help icon. I'm going to start by sharing highlights from our most recent research. Then I'll be joined by Melanie from Capital One and Sampath Sowmyanarayan from Verizon Business. Together we'll discuss the what, why, and how of creating the blended workplace of the future. The ongoing global pandemic has accelerated many organizations' digital workplace transformations. The experience of working remotely has proven to be a remarkable success, and few organizations will go back to the way things were before. New research by Harvard Business Review Analytic Services found that the majority of business leaders surveyed say the quality of remote work has been at least as good as the work done in the physical workplace. What's more, many have seen improvements in a variety of key business metrics as a result of their investments in digital work. Now, this doesn't mean all work will be virtual. The future workplace will be a blend of remote, mobile, and in-person experiences, requiring a digital fabric to make that possible. So just a little bit about the research. We conducted the survey in May of this year, so it's very fresh. We had over 1,000 respondents from people all around the world. We had a great mix of company size, industry, and function. We've listed the top ones here, but those lists go really deep. And it was a pretty senior audience, with 54% being from executive or senior management. Now, what we wanted to find out is we wanted to understand the extent of organizations' digital workplace efforts, the drivers behind those efforts, and the capabilities required. We also wanted to explore how organizations are adapting their work processes and using technology to change the way work gets done. Along with all the challenging aspects of the pandemic, one of the good things that's happened is that it's really normalized remote working for many organizations. Respondents anticipate more remote work in the future than before the pandemic, and that's based on the positive results that they're seeing in work quality, productivity, business agility, and more. A lot of people are really anticipating that a hybrid model is going to evolve once it is safe to return to in-person engagement. And those that are further along at the forefront, they're really working to optimize the digital workplace for both quality and efficiency. And they're doing that by better integrating and supporting the necessary digital tools, but also by evolving and creating new work norms as well. Once the pandemic is passed, it will be critical to support not just working from home, but also mobility. Now, everyone who took part in the survey had some degree of remote work happening in the company. 66% said that was happening pretty broadly across their enterprise. A key finding in the research is that 61% say the quality of remote work is at least as good as that done in the physical workplace, and only 22% disagree with that. Now, that's something that prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of doubt about. This experience has really proven out that remote work can be as high quality and as efficient as the work that is done in person, with some caveats, of course. As a consequence of that, more than 3/4 of respondents expect the amount of remote work to increase in the future from what was the case before. That's all of that green that you see there. And then 30% expect a significant increase. That's the darkest green. We segmented the respondents into leaders, followers, and laggards based on the maturity of their digital workplaces. So it runs a gamut from leaders, mobility is everywhere, online collaboration is a normal way of working, most applications and services are online, down to the people who are least mature in this, where only a few online applications and services with little or no standardization of tools. Now, there's a lot going on in this slide, so I'll just talk you through it. We asked respondents how the following had changed as a result of their investments in the digital workplace. These are this is a money shot. And remarkably, we're seeing improvements or no change in almost every key business metric. The top three there, over 50% of respondents said that business agility, business continuity, and collaboration have improved because of their investments in digital workplace. Now, those with the digital workplace strategy are consistently more likely to see greater returns than those that don't. For instance, 52% with a strategy have increased productivity compared with only 40% of those without. Now, having a strategy means going beyond a mere work-at-home policy to define the purpose and goals of the program, the approach the organization will take, and how they're going to measure success. The workplace of the future will be a blend of physical and digital. 86% of respondents said that the digital workplace must integrate and coexist with the physical workplace for the foreseeable future, and 57% strongly agree. When we got into the interviews and talking to the executives about how this is going to play out, what a lot of people said was that, remote and virtual work is great for productivity, for independent work. You're writing reports, you're doing analysis. But where the in-person has become really important, and they're seeing that things might be slipping a little bit, is in, first of all, for culture building. You're onboarding new employees. You want them to really understand what the culture is and to sustain that culture. It's also really important for relationship building, whether that's with a new client or you're putting together a new team where the people don't know each other yet. And so far, to some extent, where there is very intensive or high collaboration for projects that really, without the experience, getting in the same room is still the best way to go. Of course, getting all that great value that we talked about a couple of slides ago doesn't just happen. There are a lot of things that go into really being able to get that value from those investments. Everything seems important. If you look at, so the darkest blue here is high importance, 8 to 10 on a 10-point scale. And so number one, securing our data. This is a new, it's a continuation of where organizations have been going, but it's much more intensified. And the pandemic has taught us a lot of things, and one of them is that the bad guys are, very adaptable and look for every opportunity. So that's number one, securing our data. You have to have the infrastructure that can support digital work, and that's pretty much table stakes. But that's something that a lot of companies have been working on, and I think a lot of people felt pretty good about the results that they have seen so far. Tools that are easy to use, training for managers and for employees. Remote work is different. It's different to manage a team when they're not across the hall from you. So that's something that people are having to learn, and that has to be communicated to people, the work norms about what are the hours, when are you expected to be at your desk, how are we collaborating today. So all of that takes training and communication. Respondents are split on whether or not it's easier or harder to get good results from digital collaboration. So this question was, do you agree or disagree that it's harder? And if you look on the left, 40% disagree, the two green bars. But look on the right, and 40% agree that it is harder. So this is based on people's individual experience, the maturity of their organization in doing all of this. And it's evolving. It's definitely an area that's evolving and people need to focus on if they expect to continue more of this digital work. As I said before, once the pandemic is over, virtual work will become more mobile as we all get back out into the world. We're not all going to be sitting at home anymore. And 5G is going to be an enabler of that. You know, companies' customers are already mobile, and their expectations for what that experience is going to be like with your company is just going higher and higher every time. So the traditional, typical ways of doing that, companies are really taking a look. And what was interesting to me, I was kind of surprised by how quickly respondents thought this was going to happen in their companies. But if you look at the two green bars together, 41% expect 5G mobile technology to be a reality for their organization within the next 2 years. And it's going to enable things like, new ways of engagement such as augmented reality and high quality, low latency video, things that are really important to improving that also important customer experience. So just to wrap things up, the pandemic has normalized remote work and proven the value of digital workplace capabilities. The workplace of the future will mix in-person and virtual work that will be based on the nature of the work and the people involved. Managing this well will take new skills and abilities and new work norms and new tools. Because of that, it won't happen overnight. To maximize those benefits, things like work quality, business agility, efficiency, and employee well-being, all those things that we saw before, companies have to develop a digital workplace strategy to define the purpose and goals of their program, the approach they're going to take, and how they will measure success. And finally, while most of our focus has been on working from home, working remotely during the pandemic, companies really need to be planning for the future where it's not just going to be working from home, but untethered high-quality mobility as well. I'm delighted to be joined by two technology experts to discuss all of this with me now. Melanie Frank is Managing Vice President of Technology at Capital One. Melanie has extensive experience in financial services technology and is an active champion of encouraging women to pursue interests in STEM. Sampath leads the global enterprise segment for Verizon Business Group, with responsibility for delivering innovative business solutions to Verizon's global enterprise clients. Melanie and Sampath, thank you for joining us today. So let's just start by, let's talk a little bit about what will the blended digital physical workplace actually look like? What is that going to, how is that going to play out for people?
So I can jump in on that one. It's interesting to think about and contemplate, particularly with as quickly as technology evolves, to wonder what the future will look like. For us, at Capital One, we were one of those first companies to shift to work from home, mainly to protect our associates. Earlier in March, we started with our office space kind of knowledge workers, then moved on very quickly within kind of week 2 to our call center operations. Definitely two completely different functions to have working from home in that environment. And we're still working completely virtually and plan to do so until early next year. For us, our strategy really to enable our people to work from anywhere on any device helped us make the shift very quickly. For me, as I envision the future, when I talk to my team, it's that we don't want the technology to constrain the business strategy and choices. And so from a technology perspective, I think about how can you make it possible so that the businesses and the individuals then can choose what is best for their needs. And we've definitely seen a mix of, as you referenced, where now our openness to different business strategies where it pertains to where people work and how people work, our minds have really been opened along those lines. And now we're back to really where the choice is really down to what the individuals need based on their own desires and setup. And so to me, it is the technology that makes it possible. And I think COVID leveled the playing field. Previously, those working remotely have felt second class. Ideally, this has changed the way we work. And once we end up in that hybrid model, it won't matter really where someone is located. And my hope is that we don't shift back into that mode where, those in person in the office feel like they're at the main part of the table, and those working remotely feel like they're at the back, but yet it all feels cohesive as it does today.
I do think it's a technology agnostic conversation, similar to what Melanie said, because look, I think that different types of roles and functions will have different rules on this. I think functions like, call centers, order managers, project managers, inside sales, where, it's what I call a P times Q function. In other words, performance management is not the most complex thing. It's a pretty objective measure of output. You can track it. Those roles, much more suited to a remote work environment. Technology will not be a stopper in that. It will move very fast. Also, as data and insights get deeper and deeper, you're able to do better performance management, but also give them the right tools to get the job done. I think when you get to more staff functions that require just a lot more collaboration, where 1 + 1 is significantly greater than 2, this whole concept of hybrid model comes, where you have the flexibility to work anywhere, but if you need to get together somewhere, you have a place to get together. And I think that's the model that's probably going to scale for some of the more collaboration sensitive roles that go on. Tools can help, tools will help, but there's still got to be some human connection there to make that collaboration magic.
I'm curious to know, what are the pieces that are missing? Is there the, is it the water cooler piece that's missing? Is it the ability to, quickly, we're doing a lot by video and everybody's really busy, but, are we getting to action quickly enough? What is it that's missing, and how are you, Melanie, and Sampath, how are you seeing your customers work through that?
I think Sampath hit on it in his last answer, which is that human connection piece. And I think there's only so much that you can do on video and with tech to really simulate what a live interaction with a human being looks like. So you mentioned the water cooler. I was thinking about, how do you set up a virtual water cooler or lunchroom? People have to be in this mode. They have to be very purposeful about scheduling those type of check-in conversations, and sometimes just the informal run-ins that help build the relationships that really make the world go round. And so one of the things I'm most curious about, and I talk to people about, I think most often, is, are we as effective as we are today because we had spent so much time in the office together, and there's this pre-established set of relationships and trust, and how will that look as more and more people start and maybe never had the chance to interact in person? I ask that question of, folks that I work with who are relationship managers or, in sales, how's it going? And they say that it is fairly easy to keep up the relationship with existing clients, but very difficult, more difficult to build relationships with new ones. And so I think that's the key is how do you do that, and how do we change our expectations and behaviors there, and acknowledge that, you just can't replace that human interaction entirely.
Yeah, and social norms get set. And when they get set, you can use them to your advantage. I'm right now working through, I think, our second class of new joiners, folks who've just joined Verizon. And so here you're in a company with anywhere from 120 to 200,000 people, and you just put into the organization. And, who are the folks you call, who are the people you lean on to as you integrate into the organization. It's not straightforward. The technology piece is the easy part. We have a nice box. We send you a laptop with a mic and a nice selfie light, and the world's good. But the social connection, the social norms tend to be very difficult for new joiners and newcomers, which is why I think we've got a lot more work to do to scale out this remote work as, it relates to new problems, new groups of people joining in.
Yeah, and as when we get back into whatever that next normal is going to look like, and we have that blend of physical and virtual work happening, it's still going to be a digital workplace, right? I mean, you can't have that blend without the digital workplace. So what does it take to create that, to have it be really effective, and what gets in the way? And I'm thinking of everything from, the technology infrastructure, the skills, policies, new work norms, anything that is going to have to sort of be worked through for organizations who are making the shift.
Yeah, and I think, look, I think there are two pieces to it. There's the what I call the soft side of things, and I'll get to that in a bit. And then there's the technology, which is what I call, as you say, the effective digital workplace. I think there are 4 or 5 really critical things here. Look, at Verizon, we do this for a living, and if I go too long, stop me. Look, the first is just a scalable network. We call it software-defined network. Where network, we can move workloads in and out quickly. You can move resources very quickly depending on where the demand is coming from. And to be honest, only around probably 20% of the large enterprises have a software-defined network. So there's a lot of more work to do, and that's kind of the foundation of everything. Second is in work that Melanie does. It's just around cloud-ready applications, whether it's for collaborations, core ops, and support, just enabling that readily available in forms that people can consume. Third one is just secure mobile connectivity. This is more and more important because earlier everything was done in an office, and it worked. Your LAN or your wireless LAN worked pretty much, but right now you may be sharing an apartment with a friend or a roommate. You may be working out of a library. You may be working out of a park. So just that ability to have secure mobile connectivity, pretty seamlessly. Another one I would throw down is, kind of end-to-end monitoring of applications. Earlier, all applications most of them were accessed in the office. Yeah, they kind of worked because, you literally built the church for Easter there. But now you have these critical applications, whether it be ERP or some of the deep technology applications. You access them from pretty much different parts that they were not really designed for. And just the ability to manage that application and the underlying network with it to ensure that the user gets what he or she asked for. And then look, the last one I would say is just an end user support model. Most offices, you go down to the basement, there's an IT support desk that took care of everything for you. Now you're working out of home. What does an end user support model looks like? For the hardware stuff, for the software, troubleshooting. So those are, I would say, 4 or 5 key things that almost become the foundation of a digital workplace. Once we get that right, some of the softer skills and others can be built on it.
Yeah, and Melanie, when you and I spoke before, you've had a lot of these pieces in place for some time, but hadn't been using it at the scale or scope that you are obviously right now and intend to in the future. So what are some of the other things that really are key to making this work most effectively?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think Sampath hit the nail on the head in his prior answer. For us, our tech strategy, I think you could see the difference in the companies that have different strategies or ability and willingness to invest, right? So I think what this takes is a willingness to continuously invest in keeping your tech modern, which allows you to pivot quickly. And so some of the elements that Sampath outlined earlier, really is a bit of a more modern tech stack. And if you hadn't been there for us, the fact that, one of our underlying principles is, cloud first, showed up in almost all of our tech in terms of our ability to scale it, whether it was our business applications and our customer-facing applications or our associate-facing applications. And that shows up in terms of the things that we build as well as the partners that we work with. And so leveraging a Zoom, for example, that is cloud-based, their use case and their scale story from kind of before and after and their ability to scale quickly was largely driven by that cloud native type technology. And so I think that to me, as things progress, as we move into the future, that constant attention to ensuring that your investment stays modern and secure is the fundamental kind of mentality and strategy that you need to have to be able to pivot quickly and make those changes.
That seems like that's pretty big, very important, first of all, from a competitive standpoint for the companies that do that and who stay modernizing their technology as things evolve compared to companies that can't do that. But I think it's going to be a lot more challenging as companies are still wrestling with the economic impact of the shutdowns. So, I would say that in the future there's going to be some clear winners and losers in the competitive front.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's not an easy thing, right? Certainly, you don't make a declaration and say, we're going to be cloud first and snap your fingers and it's there. For us, it's been a 7-year journey. If perhaps we were a new startup, that would be different. But for anyone who, any company that's been around for a long enough period of time, you have to make the shift from legacy to modern technology in some way, shape, or form. And that takes time and patience and continued investment. And, that's supremely important.
Yeah, and also there is the technology stack, as Melanie rightfully laid out, but there's also a piece around leadership and culture that plays into this. I think in a remote environment, the style of working in management, you move from an input-based measurement system to an output-based measurement system. You tend to be more flexible on hours. Another one of the things we've noticed is the number of one-on-one check-ins that folks do with their teams has gone up almost by 30%, post-COVID and working remotely. So I think just that the management style, the leadership has to go hand in hand with the tools to make this all work. And, the technology stack's hyper important, and if you don't get that right, the next part's not meaningful. But I think having the right leadership and cultural cues as well as habits reinforce the technology.
Great point. So right now the business world is still pretty locked down, but that won't last forever. The workplace of the future will absolutely include more mobility, and 5G is likely to be a big enabler of that. So Sampath, what are some of the things that 5G will make possible in terms of the workplace? What are your clients most excited about?
The good thing is, as difficult as COVID's been, our 5G plans has not stopped. In fact, we've actually accelerated them because companies want things a little faster. So, we'll have nationwide 5G by the end of this year, which is just fabulous. I'm so excited about that. In terms of how critical is IoT and 5G, I think half of all new businesses are in some way or form going to rely on IoT to either drive revenue or cut costs. I mean, that's pretty big. Like almost half of all new businesses that come up are in some way or form are going to use IoT to drive it. So it's going to be core. 3 or 4 areas where we see just a lot of action. One is healthcare. The way healthcare is delivered has not really changed in the last 40 years. The medicines have gotten better, some of the imaging and things have gotten better, but just the basic model, you going, waiting outside, going to a doctor, seeing the doctor, going to the lab, nothing has changed. We think 5G is going to change that fundamentally. We've seen telehealth. There are some providers we work with who've seen 80-90% of their visits have gone to telehealth. It was single digits for decades. Who was that who said, there are decades when nothing happens and there are weeks when decades happen. This feels like those weeks where decades have happened, in terms of telehealth and healthcare. Another one is education. My 2 kids are busy working, so I think, they may be gaming, I don't know. But I do think in the medium term, AR, VR, to just have education of the future, more immersive education is going to be a pretty large use case for us. 2 more I'll throw. One is manufacturing. As America thinks of bringing manufacturing jobs back, whether it be from China or from other countries, one of the things is we're going to have to drive significant automation and robotics. So, 5G becomes kind of the operating system and the glue that keeps it all together. So that's another case where we are spending a lot of time on. The last one is government. First responders, public safety experts, giving them the information they need at their fingertips when they're fighting fires or floods and things like that. So those tend to be 3 or 4 very large use cases. Look, we are in literally, phase 1 of a very, very long revolution, industrial revolution that's going to happen. I think we're going to be talking about this 15, 20 years from now. So couldn't be a better time to be here.
One of the interesting pieces of research I saw recently was the degree to which customers have, obviously had to change their behavior and change the way they engage with companies, but the degree to which they intend to keep doing those things in those ways, even once the pandemic has passed, and it was crossing over lots of different industries. So I think you're right. This is in creating the future live as we go through this in a very rapid fashion. Melanie, I know Capital One is keeping an eye on 5G, and you've done some experimentation with augmented reality as part of your innovation cycle. Could you tell us a little bit about your innovation process here? How do you identify the right opportunities, and how do you determine when the time is right to invest in something new?
So the classic innovator's dilemma, right? So for us, I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record here in underscoring the importance of culture and strategy when it comes to it. So as I contemplate this question, I think it's a little bit of a classic, similar to the classic question of the chicken and the egg, and which comes first, the tech or the talent. And I believe this is so tightly coupled and symbiotic, right? And so for us, there's a bit of this virtuous cycle of when does the tech come? The talent draws it in, but the right tech draws the right talent, if you're following me on that one. And so there's a mix of, attracting the innovators and the thinkers, who certainly don't necessarily, flock to legacy outdated technologies. And so for us, a little bit of having this strategy of ensuring modern tech brings the talent in, that gives us the ability and that massive draw and kind of brain power to generate the ideas, to keep the look on the horizon. The fact that you're constantly looking at the horizon but not staying too far away makes it easier to get there as they pop up, right? And so for us, certainly really a 10+ year investment in a company that is 100% agile, it just becomes your lifeblood of experimentation, rapid innovation, and test and learn, right? And I think that is fully baked into those product teams as they're constantly seeking to understand how's the tech evolving, how are customer needs evolving, how do we blend those two, how do we always start with customer or associate need? Because sometimes the worst thing in tech is a tech solution that's looking for the problem. Ideally, it's more of the other way around.
Melanie and Sampath, thank you so much for that. We've run just a bit over, and unfortunately, Sampath had to jump to another commitment, but Melanie has kindly agreed to take a few questions. Melanie, we have some really terrific questions coming in from the audience, and I'm going to sort of cluster there's 3 around that question about what you were talking about is helping to build new relationships with customers or new hires. You talked about once those relationships are established, remote is great. So the question is, and there's a few of them around this, what is missing in the technology and tools to help build those new relationships? Do you have a wish list? Someone else asked, what technology do you think we'll see emerging to enable relationship building and collaboration? And then how is your company planning to organically create that human connection that we miss when we're working virtually? So a bunch around that.
I think that's an area, and thanks for having me. It's been great to participate. I think that's an area where we can expect to see innovation emerge pretty quickly, and perhaps it's innovation with new tech, perhaps it's innovation of features within existing tech that we have. Perhaps it's just creative use of best practices. There's a lot of that happening kind of inside a company the size of Capital One. We get a lot of, how are people making and establishing those connections? How are we balancing getting a team together to play a virtual game of Clue, which is one that I heard this week that everybody really enjoyed, with the desire to not spend one more second on a Zoom call or, a WebEx call or whatever your tool of choice is. So how do you balance the fatigue and let folks go while carving out some space that isn't work related to maintain the connections and build them for some of the new folks? Lots of talk about, how do you create that virtual water cooler? We have tools like Slack and Google Hangouts, where we can create channels. Some of that's going on within those types of channels. I've talked about, was there an easy way for me to open myself up to, hey, I'm in the lunchroom, I'm grabbing my lunch if anybody wants to stop by and say hi, and kind of those more casual moments. Right now, people are just being very purposeful with scheduling, meet and greets and one-on-ones and check-ins. And, for me, I'm a slave to my calendar. It's a quick reminder to just say hello, which is, as a human being, to have to remind myself of that. But I get so focused on work sometimes that, the folks that I might see in the hallway and learn something, new or check in on how their family is doing, I now have to be purposeful about doing that. And I think it's okay sometimes to have to remind ourselves. So I think there's a lot of best practices that can be leveraged within the technology that we have, but I actually look forward to some of the wish list items getting fulfilled and seeing some of those things emerge.
Yeah, those are some wonderful ideas. So sort of a flip side question is, as more people are working remotely, how do you see the workplace, the physical workplace, changing physically? Will it be used for different things? Are you thinking about new ways to, configure your space, or will it, does what you have work pretty well?
Yeah, I'd say our workplace was a mix beforehand, and I saw some of the questions in the chat on this. So we had a decent amount of flexible space, but with our dedication to Agile, we also had a high percentage of co-located Agile teams. It has been nice to see how productive the Agile teams are in the setup where they're all working from home, and they've adjusted in various ways to that. I'd say what things look like longer term for us is emerging right now as business areas, capabilities evolve their strategies and think about what their needs look like long term, both based on kind of the business outcomes they're trying to drive, but also what their people need and want. And so I think there was a reference to a space that looked like there is a space for people to go to when they need to, and different people need different things for different reasons. And perhaps that's just you can work from home, but here's the gathering place and how often is that used. But we really need time to understand what the business outcomes look like, what is needed for them, and then what the individual needs and desires look like long term as well. But I certainly see a need for less space and space that potentially looks more flexible and different, and even understanding who's actually where. Right now, our space is evolving quickly to look like what we think it will look like, almost in an interim mode, I would say, as part of our workforce starts to come back at some point in time. And that will likely look very different than it did before, which is, how do I reserve a space because I need to go in this day, but it might not be my desk. And so how do I set that up, and how do we make sure that we limit the number of people in an office and do contact tracing? So I think there's how does it look then, and then what does it look like long term?
That's so interesting, and that is one area that I see people really wrestling with right now. It's kind of like it's an agile process. It's iterative. Like what do we have? What's working? How do we make that better? Through that combination of what tools do we have, but also what are the practices we need to start implementing. Well, this has been a terrific conversation, Melanie. Thank you so much, and thank you all in the audience for your terrific questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to more of them, but I'm afraid we are out of time. So I want to thank all of you for joining us, and thank you, Verizon, for making this possible. Lots of organizations are wrestling with these issues right now, and we really do appreciate your support. This concludes our presentation. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.